open the discussion with the question. Ian.
Edgar, I see the board vice chairman helping himself to coffee or sandwiches there, but a couple of years ago, board members, including Jerry, said to us, when you do omnibus surveys, we don't believe the results of it. Where did you get the 1,200 people who said that? Because that's not what people on my street say. Of course, confidence is, as you've alluded to, John, very difficult to measure. But one of the opportunities we took then, about 3 years ago, was dropping the omnibus survey from doing it twice a year to once a year. To put more resources into, and in that particular survey was the 2010 NIPB Public Consultation Survey, which was the first survey that gathered neighbourhood satisfaction levels with policing, right down to each of the. Now, we had to aggregate some of the neighbourhoods together to small numbers, but I think we had about 140 neighbourhoods across Northern Ireland for which we did get the local people what they thought their satisfaction was with local police. Now, while we didn't publicise those results as such, they were shared primarily with PSNI area commanders and neighbourhood teams to help improve the local service from a neighbourhood team that people will get from their police. And I think that's one thing that we've looked at and says, yes, while we collected that information at that level then in 2010, the survey would maybe have been due this year, but with the PCSPs coming along, we've held fire on that for the moment. Something for PCSPs to consider, but I definitely think that those will be some of the things they're looking at to get or to continue with those types of neighbourhood satisfaction levels with police. Yes, it's costly, and yes, it'll have to be worked out how best it can be done with diminishing resources, but I think that is useful to try and get that neighbourhood satisfaction level with police. People understand much more satisfaction than they do about confidence, and can relate the satisfaction if they've received the service, be it good or bad. Confidence is something else, totally different, harder to measure, and I welcome maybe some others here today have views on that as well.
Actually, John, I'll take a copy.
Aye, thank you. I'm just interested on how you go about some people's views are weighted different than other people's views, and you have no method of collecting what weight to put on people's views, and you can give me a bit more information on that, what you actually mean.
Okay, well certainly if anybody, I can certainly help you get your hands on that Wesley Scobin study I alluded to there. But there are, and I'm no statistician by any means, and I actually actively avoid Excel sheets, but there are means of incorporating questions into surveys, whether it's through crime surveys or policing surveys, which asks people in much more detail about what they have in the Northern Ireland Crime Survey, about their age, demographic status, religion, previous contacts with the police, experiences of friends, contacts with the police. So there are a whole menu of factors which can be added in. And in terms of weighting, I'm not not sure of the science of that, but I know that's something which can be added in and is done certainly in America and Canada.
Is it the weight of the questionnaire and not the weight of the individual? Is there?
I think the issue is that when you do it, if you know what the demographic structure of society is in terms of age groups and gender and religion and so on, what sometimes you find in the survey is that there's differential response rates. Largely, young men will have a lower response rate than you'd expect in the population. And I think what can be done, and my colleagues here may well chip in on this, is that you can, if you like, adjust the results to ensure that the underrepresented groups, you can predict what their overall response would be had they been represented to the extent to which they occur in the population. That's probably a very awkward way of...
Much better than mine.
But I don't know if Tony, do you want to...
No,
Most senior statistician.
we're talking about the media
Well, I suppose any major survey where...
and it's for those that had no contact with the police, or is it for the different characteristics?
Just for anybody who is included in this survey.
My understanding is the crime survey is weighted for that. I mean, I think it's supposed to weight up the mass of the population. But yes, you could do this in cases for that, yes.
Would that criticism apply? I mean, that's quite miserable, but 75% of people don't have a view or have contact, but have maybe a slightly more benign view. Well, in your survey, which is the fallback of victims and
Yes.
witnesses possibly as well,
It's just victims of crime.
victims by definition are people who would contact.
Yes. And we were not asking about confidence, we were asking about satisfaction, which obviously brings the confidence out of it, I would say. But we're asking about the satisfaction they had with the police, and obviously it's all part of the Chief Constable's focus on improving that side of things.
But again, I think that just when you think about this, it's all part of this very patchwork quilt of confidence measures, which some people are doing, other people aren't even aware of it in other parts of the criminal justice system, and there's no sophisticated way of joining that up. So I think, I suppose, what I was saying today is we need to actually take a step back, maybe at DOJ policy level, and say, what are we actually measuring here? You know, because there's a lot of duplication, which tends not to lead to terribly much apart from, you know, organisational, you know, goals as much as anything. Oh, yes.
First, yes.
I mean, is this not a difficulty with research which is essentially quantitative anyway, that you're always going to end up with something which, you know, doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to a lot of people? And are you not making a plea for something which is more qualitative and maybe longitudinal and process-based in terms of people's confidence? And I'm not sure confidence and satisfaction are the same thing, actually. I think they're quite different. But is that not what you're saying? You're not making a plea for something which is more longitudinal and qualitative rather than
Certainly more longitudinal, but not necessarily qualitative, because I think we have a lot of quantitative measurement on the go out there, but it's just, as I said, it's not joined up. And I suppose that the crux of what I'm saying today is we need to move away from concentrating on just measurement with the police, because we've got these variety of factors which the studies actually show: neighbourhood satisfaction with your local neighbourhood, your fear of crime in your local neighbourhood, crime and disorder levels in your local neighbourhood. That, which a lot of the criminological evidence shows, that physically influences your perception of encounters with the police. That colours your perception of encounters with the police, not the other way around. So that's it. If we get that right, then that's more of an indicator of how policing has been got right in those areas. But these are community safety issues, not so much about a much more joined up approach under the DOJ's new strategy.
Sorry, just behind you first, and then Brent, and then
I was just only seeing a cup of coffee there and you didn't but
oh, sorry, a couple before you, sorry, that's all right.
all right, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm a member of this dying breed called the District Policing Partnership, and I may or may not be in this new breed called the Police and Community Safety Partnership. Who knows? But I mean, our body have been a body that have been trying to get confidence in the police, between the police, by meeting them, going out to the communities, getting information. Now, how would you think that this new body, the Police and Community Partnership, can get more confidence in the police? When we see on the road, people say to us, we'll have more confidence in the police if we have more police. Now the thing is, we won't have any more police. So what would you suggest that this new body does to build confidence in the police?
Well, as I said, certainly back in there, it's a very difficult issue. I wouldn't sort of fancy putting myself in the police commander's shoes, but it's easier to talk about it. But as I said, there are many different factors outside the physical control of PSNI, which is why we need to stop. I almost stop worrying about them as much, because they are doing you know, a good job. We need to concentrate on these wider range of factors, and if we get those right, that means all the other agencies are doing what they should. And certainly we've got, with PCSPs coming out, we've got the new DOJ strategy. I think, is it about to come out? Yes, nearly there. You know, that's what we have to focus on. And those are perennial issues about more officers and on the ground, but then of course that's an issue for local resources and priorities. But I think if we start to impact on local neighbourhood and community conditions, that's the real focal point of improving confidence or satisfaction, or whatever you want to call it, in policing more broadly, not just the police.
I think that's what PCSPs recognise, because within PCSPs you have statutory and voluntary organisations represented, and it is kind of a message that it's not all about policing, and the police in fact are one part of a much bigger picture. And I think what PCSPs will do is tie those other partners in. And it's quite interesting in terms of that community work in disadvantaged areas. I mean, the PSNI have actually been the lead there, trying to put others in, because they recognise that their response or their contribution is at best partial, and unless you've got all the other agencies pointing in the same direction with the same sort of commitment, then it's an impossible task for PSNI. Do you want to comment on that? Or?
I think John doesn't want to stand in my shoes because I don't share his sartorial elegance looking at the ones he's doing. I wouldn't disagree with anything you've said, Edgar. I think the conversation I've been having with David, Catherine and Kevin recently around the commitments and how we report on the commitments is a sort of small microcosm of this debate. Because the commitments were there as a communication to individual members of the community. That's what they could expect in service from the PSNI. And then we take feedback from individual people of how that felt for them. And then we aggregate that up to an area, and then we aggregate that up to the service. And actually we've been discussing about reporting that as a range rather than a number, and trying to keep the focus on that closer to the frontline data, because actually the more you aggregate it up, the less it means to anybody. So we've been having that debate very much live time at the moment as part of that. But a couple of things that John touched on earlier. You look at different surveys. Actually, within the British Crime Survey, the experience is that confidence in policing goes down post-contact. But actually, there's a lot of areas in Northern Ireland where confidence in police goes up post-contact, and that in some ways reflects sometimes the community expectations on their initial engagement with police service. So it's a fairly sort of mixed picture as well. But we've actually found a lot of places where that confidence rises, having actually been, particularly in those areas that weren't traditionally as receptive to the police service. So it's a very complex mix, and I think that's maybe the message that comes from today. You can't treat these things as numbers. The chief, I think, there's a little bit of exaggeration for effect around the 1 to 14, but the point very much is well made, that people prefer to talk about bad news much easier than prefer to talk about good news. And they're much more to go down to the pub, the club, or the shopping centre on a Saturday and talk about a bad experience they have with policing. And I'll look at some of the political and community representatives in the room. You're more likely to get your phone ringing about a bad news story than a good one, and it goes from there. And it's about understanding that, I'm very much focused on the service delivery piece, and that's very much around those are the basics, and you've got to get the basics right. You've got to get as high a percentage of satisfaction on the basis as you can, because without that, you just undermine yourself at every given turn.
We'll take Brent and then Carol.
Yeah, it's probably just something around the issue about public confidence. Asking the question of, how confident are you in the police? How confident are you in the criminal justice system? People will say, well, actually, yeah, I was confident in the way the police approached this, but actually I'm really disappointed with the way the justice system actually managed the whole process and what the outcome was. So I think that can have a real impact. I'm much more comfortable with customer satisfaction, people's real experience. But I did the evaluation of the West Belfast Community Safety Forum, and my sense of that was that, the ineffectiveness of the police to deal with particular issues, together with political shaping of their concerns, led to this situation where actually people felt that policing was failing. Now, as you rightly say, the answer is they didn't reside with the police alone, and it wasn't until actually, significant people then got together and said, well, okay, what is it that we need to do here? What do you need to do here? Simple enough, is shape the service to meet the needs of the community. And actually, the community have a role to play in this. They're not passive on the edge of being recipients. I suppose that's the danger around the relevance of policing. Police, it's just an observation. The police withdraw from areas around closure of police stations, etc. I mean, the economics makes tremendous sense. But do they run the risk of becoming irrelevant? They're not there. What part of that community? Maybe 10 miles down the road or 15 miles down the road. But actually, is there a risk of them becoming irrelevant? How might that impact on public confidence? There's another argument that says, well, actually, it is those disadvantaged areas that essentially see the greatest activity from within the criminal justice organisation. That's the reality of it. If you're poor, you're more likely to be a victim of crime. You're more likely to be involved in crime. You're more likely to be subject to police attention, etc. And you really don't have to drift beyond the Nolan indices in terms of understanding where activity, etc. goes on. So when I spent a lovely afternoon on the island and drifting around Strangford yesterday, a lovely drive and all the rest, and I saw a police vehicle 3 or 4 times actually when I was on that journey. I said, that's great. If I was living maybe in West Belfast or North Belfast, and there were a lot of things going on within my community that I didn't seem to be addressed, you know, how might I feel about it? So in many ways, I'm supporting your argument, saying, well, actually, just be careful about this confidence thing because it's fraught with all sorts of dangers. The reality of it is, you're going to be, in your middle class, you're going to be really unlucky if you ever have an exchange with the police. If you're poor, chances go up enormously. And if you live in poor, disadvantaged areas, and that's where the focus essentially, generally, goes on. So more observations really and questions really as a result of your discussion.
Thanks, Edgar. And it's true, you know, I've been on the board for 5 years at this stage, and every time I see an omnibus report, I just know that it doesn't reflect the experience that I live and that people in my community live, and you soak that up every day. So, and I've said all of that. So, and we actually discussed some of John's ideas at the recent conference, and I actually think that policing with the community is a concept that we've embraced, but we don't fully understand, and I don't think we've drilled down and seen how sophisticated it needs to be. And I also think this notion of confidence in policing